It all started when Cassandra Wolfhart killed a pumpkin sprout. I didn't know Cassandra personally, but I knew of her. She was friends with Tom's sister, and Tom's, well, friends with me. All that I know about Cassandra, I've learned against my will, in passing comments from adults or other kids at school. That Wolfhart girl, now that's a picky eater if I've ever seen one. One thing that everyone in town knew was that Cassandra hated pumpkins. She literally could not stand the sight of them. I once watched her start screaming at the top of her lungs when a barista at the Point Pine Cafe offered her a pumpkin spice latte. That girl was weird, and her hatred of pumpkins was the weird cherry on top of the weird sundae that was Cassandra Wolfhart. Tom said that any time Cassandra came over during the fall season, she would avoid looking into her backyard. Apparently, the first time she went over, she saw their pumpkin patch and went white as a ghost before she passed out on their kitchen floor. He showed me a dent that he swears was made by her head hitting the wooden floorboards, but Tom's kind of a liar sometimes, so I just go along with most of what he says. I knew about the other girls at school who liked to play pranks on Cassandra. One time they filled her locker with pumpkin guts, and when she opened it, she threw up in the middle of the hallway. I have to say that at first, I found Cassandra to be a little ridiculous, but now I feel bad for her. So many people constantly terrorize her with her biggest fear. I think about what I would do if someone was dangling me off a cliff as a joke, and I realize that I'd probably react the same way that Cassandra has. Last week, I was at Tom's house while Cassandra was there hanging out with her sister, Megan. Even from Tom's room, I could overhear Cassandra complaining about pumpkin spice season. I even heard her gag a few times after she said the word pumpkin. Cassandra left before dinner that day once she found out that Tom's mother was serving pumpkin bread for dessert. Boy, that girl sure hates pumpkins, Tom's dad chuckled as she went out the front door. A few days after that, Cassandra's brother managed to carry her to Tom's pumpkin patch in her sleep, and when she woke up surrounded by pumpkins, she screamed so loud that she woke up everyone in the neighborhood. They all rushed out to find her, slamming her fists over the pumpkins, punching holes into a few of them. She had apparently broken off a few nails doing this and severely cut up and bruised her hands in the process. They had to call the police and the paramedics to tear her away from the pumpkin patch, and then sedate her so they could transport her to the hospital. Since her brothers had filmed it, they were in some big trouble with the cops and their parents. May said she tried to go visit Cassandra, but she wouldn't even talk to her. She just kept crying, saying the pumpkins were going to want revenge, Tom said, as we did our history homework. Revenge for what? For what she did to them, duh. She basically murdered a bunch of pumpkins. I saw what it looked like afterward. She literally destroyed our whole pumpkin patch. I looked up at Tom, who was highlighting in a textbook. Yeah, but they're pumpkins. They don't care, I replied. She doesn't think that, he mumbled, with a highlighter cap in his mouth. I didn't hear much about Cassandra for the rest of the day. But the following morning, when Tom's parents were outside to clean up the mess, they found that all the pumpkin debris was already gone. You mean someone just cleaned it up? I asked Tom over the phone. I mean, I guess. What else could have happened? I didn't say anything because honestly, I didn't know. Maybe someone just felt bad and had decided to help Tom's family by cleaning up Cassandra's mess. It wasn't likely that she would clean up after herself, at least not without having some sort of breakdown. The following morning at 4 a.m., someone called the police claiming that there was a girl in a hospital gown wailing and running barefoot down the street. It was Cassandra. When they caught up to her, she said she was running from the pumpkin monster. She had made it all the way to our neighborhood from the hospital and collapsed on her front lawn. I watched through my bedroom window as the police talked to Cassandra and her parents for a few minutes. Something caught my eye off to the left, and I looked over to see Tom waving me down. I ran downstairs and out the front door to meet him. What's going on? I asked. She says there's a pumpkin monster out here to get her, Tom grinned. Maybe all the teasing caught up to her and she finally broke. I looked over at the rest of the neighbors who had been drawn outside onto the street by the cops and the crazy girl in the hospital gown. Or maybe not, Tom trailed off. I glanced back at him and saw that he was pointing towards one of the running paths that came out of the woods. Between two of the houses on the street, there was movement in the trees and a flash of orange before something came out of the woods. The fuck is that? I asked, Oh my god, it's here! The pumpkin monster's here! Please, you have to help me! I don't want to die! Cassandra wailed as she saw it. And for once, Cassandra wasn't crazy. The thing that had come out of the woods was, in fact, a pumpkin monster. It was about 7 feet tall and made out of the broken pumpkins from Tom's pumpkin patch. The pumpkin pieces were crudely molded together to form feet, legs, a torso, arms, hands, a neck, and finally a head. It had pumpkin guts draped all over it, hanging off its body and leaving a trail of them all over the ground. It stopped in the middle of the street, and people began to go back into their homes. It seemed to look around for a while, moving its lopsided, half-smashed pumpkin head from side to side, even though it had no eyes or any other facial features. After a few seconds, it headed straight towards Cassandra, who screamed so loud I thought my eardrums were going to burst. It began to awkwardly make its way towards her home, taking wide steps and fumbling as it tried to speed up. Oh, hell no. It shook the ground with each step, and I held on to a nearby fence for balance. The police pulled out their guns and shot it a few times, but it continued to walk, unfazed. Cassandra darted between 2 of the officers and headed towards Tom and me. What is she doing? Why is she running this way? Tom asked. The pumpkin monster pivoted and began making its way towards us as usual. Cassandra ran past us, looking back towards the monster for a second. She continued to run down the street, and Tom and I moved out of the monster's way as it chased her. After a few seconds, Tom took off after it as well. Where are you going? I asked. Don't you want to see what happens? I hesitated for a second before I followed. Hey, come back here! An officer called after us. We made it to the end of the street just in time to see Cassandra trip and roll down the small hill. We stopped and we listened to her screams as she kept rolling down the hill. No fucking way, Tom whispered. We kept watching as Cassandra rolled straight into another pumpkin patch, her head making contact with the biggest pumpkin and slamming right into it with a dull thud. Oh my god. She's dead. The pumpkin monster tripped down the field, falling over Cassandra's lifeless body and falling apart all over her and the pumpkin patch. The cops finally caught up and raced down the hill to check on Cassandra. But I was right. And she had died. Not even an hour later, there was a town-wide announcement. No more pumpkins in Point Pine. Ever. Tom and I watched from the top of the hill as people carried the pumpkins away to burn them all at the edge of town. Someone had already taken Cassandra's body away, but left the pumpkin that her head had smashed through. For days, all that anyone talked about was Cassandra's freak accident. That night, Cassandra was seen again. Multiple people reported seeing her walking around town, sobbing and asking for help. I was one of them. See, I heard her crying in the middle of the night. Looked out my bedroom window to see her standing in the middle of the road right outside her house. She was dirty and bruised, covered in pumpkin guts and dried up blood. She cried loudly, gasping for breath while she cried out. Someone please help me! Please, I hate pumpkins! I continued to watch as no one, not even her parents, turned on their lights or even looked outside. Cassandra fell to her knees in the middle of the road, continuing to cry. Before finally falling face first, her forehead pressed to the road. Please! I hate them, she cried. She continued to cry for a few minutes, and then backed away from the window and got into bed. After a few minutes, she started to scream. She's done this every single night since she's died. She screams about how we should have listened to her. Getting rid of the pumpkins now won't stop anything. She claims they'll come back. And that we're all going to die. I guess one thing that kind of sucks about Point Pine is just that the dead never really leave. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video. or listening to tonight's podcast on the podcast, if you're listening to that there at Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you could happen to listen to podcasts. I wanted to remind you guys also that my wife sells loose leaf tea at etsy.com/shop/ivorymonocle tea. She has different teas, including Creepypasta teas, and you can get a MrCreepyPasta tea if you ask for a dabbing sticker. She also has those. And of course, I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who checks out patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta and supports the show, keeps the light on, gives me treats for my now 2 cats, both Hylas and Hercules. Both of them are a handful. And especially a big thank you to Saha, Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Mazikeen, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Nico kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Stephen VanHuss, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, G. Weevil 3, TheRedOakShieldVirus, Hades' Nephew, Carter Barenfanger, Dr. Strawberry, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Bradney Leipe, The Government Monitoring System, Anne Charron, rumblefox, AcidSystem, Mike Bullock, Raphael Rodriguez, Dan Sweet, Mad Marstomp, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Sean Mills, Brian Arce, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Somber Puppet, Brianna Wright, Someone You Love, Said the King 56, Bad Honey, S-Man, Kiri the Sloth, Patrick Schoolmeister, Thomas Burgett, Barbara Maceo, Bobby Carmen, Liam Newman, The Homeless Bird 93, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Last Blade Song, Eliminator 86, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, and Corey X Kenshin. A big thank you to all of you guys and everybody down there in the description. I really can't thank you guys enough for supporting the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody who listens. Sweet dreams.